A 7-year-old girl carrying her newborn baby sister approached the table of the most powerful man in New York, mafia boss Damiano Moretti, and whispered, "Sir, can we have what's left on your plate?" What he did next made the entire restaurant fall silent, but no one knew that this meeting had been arranged 6 months earlier. The sun had not yet fully risen over the hollows, a forgotten stretch of broken buildings on the crumbling edge of Hell's Kitchen. Steam rose from a rusted manhole cover on the street below. Somewhere, a dog barked twice, then went quiet. The silence that followed felt heavier than the noise. On the 5th floor of a tenement with no working elevator, apartment 502 stirred with the smallest of movements. The windows were cracked, patched with yellowed newspaper and strips of duct tape. A radiator hissed uselessly in the corner, its warmth barely reaching the thin blanket draped over a second-hand crib. Leah Vale opened her eyes before the alarm she did not own could ring. She was 7 years old, but her body moved like someone who had already forgotten what it meant to sleep deeply. She slid off the mattress on the floor, careful not to make the springs creak, and crossed the freezing linoleum in socks with holes at the heels. Rosie was awake in the crib, her tiny fists waving at the air, her face scrunched in the first warning of a hungry cry. Leah lifted her sister with the practiced grip of a girl who had learned how to hold a baby before she had learned how to ride a bicycle. Rosie was 5 months old and weighed almost nothing. Leah had been told that was not a good sign, but there was no one left to tell it to. In the cramped kitchenette, Leah filled a chipped bottle with warm water from the tap. She measured out half a scoop of formula instead of the full scoop the label recommended. The can was almost empty, and she needed it to last 3 more days. She shook the bottle, tested a drop on her wrist the way she had seen nurses do on television, and slipped the nipple into Rosie's searching mouth. From the back room, a wet, tearing cough broke the quiet. Then another. Then a voice, thin as old paper. "Leah, child, is that you?" "Yes, Grandma. I'm feeding Rosie. Good girl, good girl." Eleanor Vale lay beneath 3 blankets in a bed that seemed too big for her shrinking frame. An oxygen tank leaned against the wall, its tube coiled like a sleeping snake. The woman's eyes were pale and wet, but they tracked Leah across the doorway with a sharpness that did not match the rest of her body. Leah changed Rosie's diaper on the kitchen counter, humming a tune she had made up herself because no one had ever sung her a lullaby. She folded the soiled diaper into a plastic bag. She rinsed the bottle. She wiped her sister's cheek with the corner of her sleeve. Then she stopped, and her fingers drifted to the silver chain around her neck. The pendant was a small raven, wings spread, eyes carved from 2 tiny black beads. It felt colder than silver had any right to feel. Someone had placed it around her neck 3 months ago and told her she must never take it off. Leah did not know why. She only knew that when she touched it, her stomach tightened in a way she could not name. Leah. She turned toward the back room. Eleanor had raised herself onto one elbow. Her voice was barely a whisper now, but every word landed like a stone dropped into still water. "Today is the day, my little one. Remember everything Miss Evelyn taught you." Leah nodded once. She lifted Rosie into the cloth sling she had tied across her own small shoulders. She pulled on a coat 2 sizes too big. She did not look back at her grandmother, because if she did, she was afraid her feet would refuse to move. She opened the door, and she stepped out into the cold gray morning. The stairwell smelled of damp concrete and old cooking oil. Leah gripped the cloth wrap across her chest with one hand and the banister with the other. Rosie stirred against her ribs but did not cry. The weight of her sister seemed to double with every landing they passed. A man slept across the 3rd-floor corridor, his boots poking out from a cardboard nest. Leah stepped over him without slowing. On the 2nd, a woman was shouting in Spanish behind a closed door. On the 1st, someone had broken the lock on the mailboxes again, and yesterday's envelopes lay scattered like dead leaves. Outside, the wind cut through her coat as if it were tissue paper. Leah adjusted the sling so Rosie's face pressed against the warmth of her collarbone. The walk to the subway station took 11 blocks. Leah counted them, because counting made the distance feel shorter. A woman in a camel coat saw her coming and crossed the street. A man with a briefcase looked once, then looked hard at his phone. A couple walking a small white dog tugged the leash tighter and quickened their pace. People did not stare at a child carrying a baby in the hollows. They looked away, because looking meant seeing, and seeing meant owing something. "I've got you," Leah whispered into the top of Rosie's head. Her breath made a small warm cloud in her sister's hair. "I've got you. Don't be scared." The stairs down to the subway platform swallowed them into yellow light and the smell of burnt coffee. Leah dropped her 2 remaining quarters into a turnstile that took a full $1.75, then slipped under the bar like she had been taught to do. A transit worker in the booth saw her. He kept reading his newspaper. He had seen worse things that morning and would see worse things before lunch. The train rattled south. At first the passengers looked like her kind of people, tired, layered in mismatched clothing, clutching plastic bags full of nothing in particular. Then, station by station, the car began to change. A woman boarded wearing a coat that smelled of lavender. A man in polished leather shoes opened a paperback in Italian. Rings flashed on manicured fingers. Perfume replaced the smell of wet cardboard. By the time the doors opened at Spring Street, Leah felt like she had crossed a border into another country. 3 months earlier, a woman had knocked on their apartment door. She was tall and elegant, with dark hair pulled into a low knot at the nape of her neck, and she carried a leather folder under her arm. She had introduced herself as Miss Evelyn Cross, a social worker assigned to their case. Eleanor had welcomed her like an old friend. The woman had knelt in front of Leah, taken the silver raven pendant from a velvet pouch, and fastened it around the child's throat with warm fingers. "There is a good man in Little Italy," she had said softly. "He owns a restaurant called Moretti's. He helps little girls like you. But you have to be very brave, and you have to go alone, and you have to remember exactly what I tell you." Leah had nodded then, because Eleanor had nodded first. Little Italy moved at a different speed than the world Leah knew. Men in charcoal suits stepped out of black cars without waiting for the engines to shut off. Women in heels clicked past on the sidewalks holding phones to their ears in 3 different languages. 2 bodyguards stood outside a jewelry store with their hands folded at their waists, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky. Leah walked the length of Mulberry Street with her chin tucked down. She did not belong here, and every reflection in every window told her so. Her coat was the wrong color. Her sling was the wrong fabric. Her shoes had been glued back together twice. She passed Moretti's on the opposite side of the street and kept walking. She crossed at the corner and passed it again, slower this time. She circled the block and came upon it a 3rd time, and now she stopped across the road and made herself look. The restaurant's facade was dark green with gold lettering. 2 heavy oak doors framed a set of brass handles shaped like olive branches. A chalkboard on an easel listed the day's specials in a cursive hand. Through the front window, she could see white tablecloths and candles already lit, even though it was morning. Rosie began to cry. The sound was small at first, a whimper, then a real wail. The bottle from breakfast was gone, and the formula can was 3 miles and a subway ride away. Leah pressed her palm against the raven at her throat. The silver was warm now, heated by her own skin, but the pressure against her chest still felt like a hand. She took 1 breath in. She took 1 breath out. She crossed the street. She pushed open the door of Moretti's. The warmth hit her first. It came out of the restaurant like a physical thing, carrying the scent of garlic, seared butter, and something older beneath it, all cedar, or maybe expensive cigar smoke that had soaked into the walls over decades. Moretti's was not a restaurant. It was a cathedral dressed as one. Dark oak paneling climbed every wall to a pressed tin ceiling. A single chandelier hung from the center of the room, its crystals catching the low light and throwing small rainbows across the white linen. Brass sconces glowed along the edges. Every table wore a short candle in a hurricane glass. Every chair sat pulled out at the same precise angle, and the silverware had been placed with the patience of a jeweler setting stones. The lunch crowd had not yet arrived, but the tables that were occupied by men who did not flinch when the door opened. They glanced. They noted. They returned to their plates. 2 of them wore wedding rings. All of them wore watches that cost more than the building Leah lived in. At the very back, beneath a mirror framed in dark wood, sat 1 table set for 1. He did not look up when she entered. Damiano Moretti was reading the Wall Street Journal, folded lengthwise the way men of a certain generation folded their papers. His left hand curled around an espresso cup, so small it looked like a thimble in his grip. His suit was charcoal with a faint chalk stripe. His shirt was white. His tie was the color of dried blood. A plate of veal and lemon sat half-eaten before him. He did not appear to have tasted it in some time. 2 men stood against the back wall, hands folded in front of them. They did not speak. They did not need to. Their presence was the whole sentence. A woman in a cream blouse moved out from behind the host stand the instant Leah stepped past the threshold. She had the same sharp jawline as the man in the back corner, and the same way of scanning a room in one motion. Sophia Moretti was halfway across the floor before her heels had finished their first click. "Sweetheart, this isn't," she stopped. She stopped because from the back of the room, without lifting his eyes from his newspaper, her brother had raised 2 fingers off the tablecloth. It was the smallest gesture a hand could make. It froze Sophia in place as surely as a locked door. Leah kept walking. The floor between her and the corner table seemed to lengthen with every step. Her shoes made small wet sounds on the polished wood. Rosie had gone quiet against her chest, as if the baby understood, in the way babies understand things they cannot name, that this was not a room for crying in. A man closer to Damiano shifted his weight. His name was Marco Ricci, and his right hand had moved 2 inches inside his vest. Leah did not see the gun. She felt it, the way children feel weather before it arrives. She stopped 3 feet from the table. Damiano Moretti turned the page of his newspaper. Leah's voice, when it came, was smaller than she had rehearsed in her head, and steadier than it had any right to be. "Sir." He did not look up. "Sir," she said again, "when you are finished eating, could my sister and I please have what is left on your plate?" The clink of a fork somewhere near the window stopped. A waiter froze mid-pour. The bottle of red wine tilted just short of the glass. Every conversation in the room collapsed at once, the way 100 small flames go out when a door is opened in winter. Damiano Moretti closed the newspaper. He folded it along the crease he had made earlier. He set it to the left of his place setting. He lifted his eyes for the first time since she had walked in. They were gray, the color of the Hudson in February, and they did not blink. They moved across her face first, then down to the small shape bundled against her chest. Then, with no hurry at all, to the silver chain at her throat and the raven resting just beneath her collarbone. They lingered there. Somewhere inside his own mind, in the quiet room he kept for such thoughts, he was already turning a single observation over like a coin, a child asking for scraps. No tears, no shaking hands, no rehearsed pleading voice. She stood the way soldiers stood when they had been taught to stand, and she waited the way soldiers waited when they had been taught to wait. And she was wearing a pendant that no child of the Hollows could have afforded in 3 lifetimes. Marco, at the edge of his vision, tilted his head a fraction of an inch. A silent question. "Boss?" Damiano did not answer him. He reached out. He pulled the empty chair across from his own, away from the table with the toe of his polished black shoe. "Sit down, little one." Leah sat. The chair was too tall for her. Her feet did not touch the floor, and she did not try to make them. She adjusted the sling so Rosie's head rested against the crook of her elbow, and she folded her free hand on the edge of the tablecloth the way she had seen a girl do in a storybook once. Damiano raised 1 finger. A waiter appeared as if he had been summoned by weather. He did not bring a menu. "Tell Enzo," Damiano said quietly, "a plain chicken cutlet, soft pasta with butter, no pepper, and a bowl of vegetable puree, warmed, not hot, strained twice." The waiter blinked once. "For the baby." Damiano did not look at him. "Strain twice, Paolo. If there is a lump in that bowl, I will know." "Yes, sir." The waiter vanished. Across the room, a second waiter was already filling a carafe of water without ice and setting it on the corner table with 2 glasses. A third had appeared with a cloth napkin, which he unfolded and laid across Leah's lap with the grave courtesy he would have offered a senator's wife. Sophia watched from the host stand with her arms folded. She did not move closer. She did not move away. When the bowl arrived, Leah did not touch it. She tested the temperature of the vegetable puree against the inside of her own wrist first. She stirred it twice with the small silver spoon. She pinched a corner of her napkin and wiped the edge of the bowl where a single drop had beaded. Only then did she dip the spoon, lift a careful portion, and offer it to Rosie's waiting mouth. Her movements were not careful because she was nervous. They were careful because she had done them 100 times before, in kitchens that had no spoons like this one. Marco had drifted closer. He leaned down beside Damiano's ear until his lips were almost at the shell of it. "Boss, something is wrong. A child does not arrive at this door on this morning by accident." She walked past the window 3 times before she came in. Luca saw her from the car. Damiano did not turn his head. "I know, then send her away." "No. Boss, stand back, Marco." Marco stepped back. His hand left his vest. His eyes did not leave the child. Rosie finished 4 small spoonfuls and began to nod toward sleep. Only then did Leah turn to her own plate. She cut the cutlet into pieces small enough for a much younger child. She chewed each bite with her mouth closed. She did not gulp, though her body wanted to. Somewhere along the way, someone had taught this child that eating too fast in front of strangers was the same as admitting you had not eaten yesterday. Damiano watched her across the rim of his espresso cup. "What is your name?" "Leah Vale, sir. This is my sister. Her name is Rosie." "How old are you, Leah Vale?" 7. "And your parents?" A small pause. Not a flinch. A pause measured in a single heartbeat. My mother died when Rosie was born. My father, she lifted one shoulder, a child's version of a grown woman's shrug. Nobody ever knew who he was. Who takes care of you then? My grandmother. Where is she today? At home. She couldn't come. She is dying. Damiano set the espresso cup down. He set it down slowly, the way a man sets down a loaded weapon in a room full of strangers. The small porcelain sound it made against the saucer was the loudest noise in the restaurant for 3 full seconds. The child had said it like the weather. She is dying. The same tone another child might have used to say it is Tuesday. The front door chimed. Vincent Colombo walked in, brushing rain off the shoulders of his overcoat, saw the table in the back corner, saw the child across from his cousin, saw the baby, and stopped inside the doorway the way a man stops when he has walked into the wrong room. His mouth pulled down at one corner. He did not approach. He went instead to the bar and ordered something he did not want. Damiano did not acknowledge him. Marco. Boss. Bring the car around. We are taking them home. Boss. The car, Marco. Marco left. Leah wiped the corner of Rosie's mouth with her napkin and looked up at the man across the table. She did not ask why. She did not say thank you. She simply nodded once, the way one soldier nods at another after an order has been given. In the alley behind the kitchen 5 minutes later, Vincent caught up with Damiano beside the open rear door of the Bentley. Are you out of your mind? Damiano adjusted his cuff. You cannot get involved with some strange child off the street. Do you know what this looks like? Do you know how fast this will move through every family from here to Philadelphia by tonight? I know. Then what, Dante? What? Damiano turned. The gray of his eyes had cooled another degree. I want to know who pushed her through that door. He got in the car. The black Bentley rolled to a stop on a street that had never seen a car like it. The tenement leaned slightly to the left, as buildings in the hollows tended to do after enough winters. A broken drainpipe spilled a slow brown stream down the brick. A cat watched from behind a dumpster. 2 boys who had been kicking a flattened soda stopped where they were standing and did not move again until the car was gone. Luca Bianchi killed the engine. He did not get out right away. He scanned the windows across the street first, 1 floor at a time, the way he did everywhere. Then he opened his door. Damiano stepped out into air that tasted of wet garbage and cold rust. This is where you live? He asked the child softly. Leah nodded. She shifted Rosie's weight in the sling and started toward the front door of the building as if the question did not deserve a longer answer. The stairs swallowed them 5 flights at a time. Marco walked a step behind the child, Luca behind his boss, one hand resting lightly on the banister, and the other resting lightly where Marco's own hand had rested an hour ago. Somewhere above them, a television was playing a game show in Portuguese. A saucepan clattered. A woman laughed once, sharply, and stopped. Leah unlocked the door of apartment 502. She stepped inside and held it open for the 3 men behind her. It took Damiano less than 5 seconds to read the room. The refrigerator was standing open a crack. Inside, he could see a single carton of store-brand milk and half a stick of butter. A cabinet above the stove was missing its door. The shelves held 2 cans of soup and a sleeve of saltines. There was no fruit. There was no meat. There were no medicines on the counter. There was, however, one framed photograph on the wall beside the kitchenette. It showed a young woman in a summer dress holding a little girl on her hip. The little girl had Leah's face. Damiano looked at it for a long time without letting his eyes move. Leah, child, is that you? Who? The voice came from the back room, and then the woman attached to it appeared in the doorway, gripping the frame. Eleanor Vale was smaller than Damiano had expected. Her skin had the papery quality of long illness. An oxygen tube snaked from her nose to a battered green tank leaning against the wall behind her. Her hand flew to her mouth when she saw the 3 men standing in her kitchen. Oh, dear God. Leah, what have you done? She shuffled forward 2 steps, and then seemed to lose strength, and caught herself against the counter. Sirs, I am so sorry. She is a good girl. She is only a child. Whatever she told you, whatever she asked you for, we do not take charity in this house. We have never, Mrs. Vale. Damiano's voice cut gently across hers, the way a scalpel cuts gently across skin. Your granddaughter did not ask for charity. She asked for the leftovers on my plate. I offered the rest. The old woman's eyes filled. A tear fell into the hollow above her collarbone and pooled there. It was a very good tear. It arrived exactly when a tear should arrive, and it stopped exactly when a tear should stop. Leah crossed the kitchen and took her grandmother's elbow to steady her. Grandma, please. He is a nice man. He fed Rosie. The woman allowed herself to be led to the kitchen chair. She lowered herself into it, as though her bones were glass. My daughter, Eleanor whispered, as though the words were being pulled out of her against her will. My daughter passed 2 winters ago. The baby Rosie, she did not survive it. Her father, we never. The pension barely covers the electric. I have been trying to. She broke off in a cough that went on too long. Damiano waited it out without moving. When it ended, he said quietly, "The lungs. Yes, sir. No insurance. No, sir." His eyes returned to the photograph on the wall. The young woman in the summer dress was smiling a perfect smile. Her hair caught the light at a perfect angle. The shadow of the little girl on her hip fell in a direction that the sun, from the angle of her face, should not have made fall. A man who had spent 30 years looking at documents designed to deceive him knew a forged photograph when he stood in front of one. He did not say so. Marco leaned in and murmured at his shoulder, voice low enough that only one person in the room was meant to hear it. "Let me run a check. I want to know who these people really are." Damiano gave the smallest possible nod. He walked to the closet beside the front door. A single cardboard shoebox sat on the top shelf, its lid held down by a dried-out rubber band. He opened it. It contained 3 birthday cards, a pair of child's mittens, and nothing else. From inside his coat, he produced a thick fold of bills wrapped in a paper band. $10,000 in crisp hundreds. He placed it in the shoebox, replaced the lid, and set the box back on the shelf. "Tomorrow morning," he said to Eleanor without turning around, "a doctor will come to this door. You will let him in. You will answer his questions." "Sir?" Tomorrow morning, Mrs. Vale." He turned. He crouched to Leah's height. He did not touch her. "Thank you for lunch, Leah Vale." He rose. Marco and Luca followed him out. The door closed. In the silence that followed, Eleanor Vale lifted her eyes from the floor. Leah lifted hers from the photograph. And the old woman, for the first time that morning, allowed herself a small, narrow smile. The penthouse on 5th Avenue sat 72 floors above a city that never stopped breathing, and for most of those floors the breathing was the only thing a man could hear up there. Damiano Moretti stood at the glass wall of his study with his back to the room. Below him, the park lay black and still, cut through with the gold thread of headlights along 5th. He had not turned on a single lamp. The only light in the room came from the skyline itself, and from the amber of an untouched Macallan on the desk behind him. It was 11 minutes past 2 in the morning. He had not slept. The phone on the desk buzzed once. He crossed to it without hurry, tapped the screen, and put it to his ear. "Go." Marco's voice was flattened the way it got when Marco was trying to talk himself down from something. "Boss, I've been on this since we left Hell's Kitchen. I've pulled every favor I keep and a few I don't. And that's the thing. There's nothing. Nothing. No tax filings under Eleanor Vale. No Medicare number. No voter registration. No utility bill in her name at that address or any address. No pension. Nobody born named Rosie Vale in this state in the last 2 years. Leah Vale has no school records under any of the names I tried. The mother you asked about, the one in the photo, she doesn't exist in any database I can touch, and I can touch most of them. You checked overseas. I checked everywhere. Eleanor Vale wasn't a human being who paid rent in this country before 2019, and before that she wasn't anywhere." Damiano was silent. "Boss," Marco said carefully, "a person who is that clean is either in federal protection, or a trap. Damiano's reflection looked back at him from the glass. A man of 38 standing in a silk robe at 2 in the morning, looking older than 38 and younger than he had felt in a long time. "Keep digging, Marco." Quietly. "Nobody outside our table." "Yes, boss." He set the phone back on the desk. He did not reach for the whiskey. For a long moment he did not reach for anything at all. He had been 10 years old the first time a room went quiet the way Moretti's had gone quiet that morning. He remembered it in pieces, the way a man remembers the worst days of his life. The red gingham tablecloth, his father laughing at something his mother had said, the smell of basil, the sudden cough of a pistol that was not a pistol until it was, his father's hand, still holding a fork, falling across the edge of the plate and knocking a glass of wine onto the floor. The wine and the blood mixing beneath the table in a puddle a child should never have had to look at. His mother had pulled him and Sophia under that same table, one child under each arm, and she had not wept until the men who did the shooting had left the room. Then she had wept for 3 days without stopping, and she had never truly stopped after that. Not really, not in any way anyone else could see. At 25, when the seat passed to him, Damiano had sat down in his father's chair and made 2 rules for the family that bore his name. The first was that no man who worked for him would ever raise a hand to a woman. The second was that no man who worked for him would ever raise a hand to a child. He had built an empire on those 2 rules. He had enforced them with a cold, surgical patience that had made men twice his age very careful about how they spoke his name in their own kitchens. He had also, somewhere along the way, made a 3rd rule, which he had never said out loud, because it was for him alone. Do not love anyone, because the men who killed your father will find them. He had kept all 3 rules for 13 years. Today, a 7-year-old girl in a coat 2 sizes too big had walked into his restaurant and asked for the scraps off his plate, and somewhere beneath the Macallan and the skyline and the silence, the 3rd rule had begun to crack. He picked up the phone again. Luca, boss. The apartment in the Hollows. 24 hours. Rotating shifts. I want to know who comes up those stairs. I want to know who goes down them. I want photographs. I want plate numbers. Nobody in that building sneezes without you hearing it. Understood. And Luca. Yes? The old woman does not leave that apartment without us knowing where she is going. Yes, boss. He set the phone down again. This time he looked at the whiskey, and this time he did not drink it, because a man about to walk closer to a trap wanted his hands steady, not warm. Across town, in an alley 2 blocks from Grand Central, a woman in a long charcoal coat stood beside a dumpster and waited. Her breath made small white shapes in the cold. She did not check her watch. She knew what time it was. A second figure came around the corner, smaller, hunched into a dark scarf. The oxygen tube was gone. The tremor was gone. Eleanor Vale moved like a woman 20 years younger than the one who had wept at her kitchen table that afternoon. Phase 1 is complete, Evelyn Cross said without looking at her. The fish has taken the hook. Cleanly? The consigliere ran a check tonight. He found exactly what we wanted him to find. A ghost. That will make Moretti lean in, not pull back. It always does with that kind of man. Eleanor nodded. Keep the child obedient, Evelyn said. She is emotional. That is useful. But do not let her know anything she does not need to know. Not the timeline, not the next location, not the end. She is a good girl. She is a tool. Do not forget which one of you are. From inside her coat, Evelyn produced a small glass vial. The liquid inside was pale amber, almost clear. She placed it in Eleanor's gloved hand. Give this to the baby at night. A single drop on the tongue. What does it do? Evelyn's smile did not reach her eyes. It helps her sleep quietly. That is all you need to know. She turned and walked back into the dark. Eleanor stood alone by the dumpster for a long moment, looking down at the little glass bottle in her palm, and then she slipped it into her pocket and began the long walk home. The doctor arrived at 9 in the morning, exactly as promised. He was a quiet man in his 60s, who had been trained at Johns Hopkins and had not accepted a new patient in 6 years. He carried 2 black leather bags up 5 flights of stairs without complaint, listened to Eleanor's lungs for a full 15 minutes, wrote out 3 prescriptions for medications she would never take, and left without asking a single question that might have been answered by a paper trail. An hour later, a grocery delivery filled the kitchen counter with more food than the apartment had seen in a year. An hour after that, a pediatric nurse in a pressed white coat examined Rosie from scalp to toes and pronounced the baby small for her age but otherwise healthy. By noon, there was heat in the radiator and hot water in the tap and a rug covering the cracked linoleum in the living room. By early afternoon, Damiano himself was at the door. He carried a paper bag from a bakery on Mott Street. He did not bring flowers, because flowers were for apologies, and he had nothing to apologize for yet. The first day, Leah kept to the far side of the table. She answered his questions with single words. She watched his hands, not his face. She had been told to be shy at first, and she was a good student. The second day, she accepted a small chocolate pastry and thanked him without looking up. The third day, she finally asked, "Why are you helping us?" He was sitting on the floor, because the apartment had only 1 working chair and he had given it to her. Rosie lay across his forearm, waving a small fist at nothing in particular. He looked down at the child at the table, and he answered her in a voice that did not soften itself for her age. "Because you were brave enough to ask. Most people only know how to steal." Leah did not reply. She thought about the raven under her shirt. It felt heavier that afternoon than it had felt in the morning. By the 4th day, the apartment had begun to smell different. Bread instead of damp. Coffee instead of mildew. Something warm was always cooking on the small stove, and the refrigerator, once a hollow box, hummed quietly under the weight of real food. Damiano showed Leah how to hold chopsticks on a Thursday evening, using 2 unsharpened pencils because she had never seen chopsticks before in her life. She held them crooked. He adjusted her fingers one at a time, his hand enormous against her knuckles, and when she finally picked up a single kernel of rice from a saucer and placed it in her own mouth, she looked up at him with a seriousness that surprised them both. "Thank you," she said. "You are welcome, Leah Vale." He picked up Rosie from the playmat on the floor. He held her up at arm's length, and the baby looked down into his face, studied it the way babies study faces they have decided to trust, and then laughed out loud. It was a real laugh, a bright, astonished sound, the kind of laugh a child makes when the world has just done something pleasantly impossible. Damiano Moretti laughed back. It happened before he could decide whether to allow it. A short, rough sound out of a throat that had not made that sound in 6 years. Somewhere in the doorway, Sophia, who had come by with an armload of small coats and a thermos of minestrone, stopped walking and simply watched. She did not say anything about it. She set down the coats. She kissed her brother on the cheek. She left. On the 5th evening, Leah fell asleep in the one chair. She had been trying to stay awake. Rosie was down for the night, and the grandmother was down too, and the apartment was warm and quiet, and the soup Damiano had heated up for her was the most food she had eaten in one sitting in months. Her eyes closed between one sentence and the next. He watched her for a long moment. He did not wake her. He rose from the floor without making the boards creak. He took off his dark wool overcoat, the one cut for him in Milan, and he laid it across her small body from shoulders to shins. The coat was almost as long as she was. He sat back down on the floor. He watched her breathe. He did not move for 40 minutes. That night, after he was gone, a phone buzzed once beneath Leah's mattress. A small black prepaid flip that Eleanor had shown her how to open without looking. "Leah." "Yes, Miss Evelyn." "Good girl. Talk to me." "He showed me how to hold chopsticks." "Does he play chess?" "I don't know." "Let him teach you. Men like that love to teach. Ask him about his schedule. When he wakes up, when he eats, when he leaves the building, and when he comes back. Small steps, little Leah. Small steps. Do not rush it." "Yes." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Evelyn's voice, when it returned, was slightly colder. "You sound tired." "I'm fine. Remember what I told you, child. He is not your friend. He is not your father. He is the mark." "I remember." The line went dead. Leah closed the phone. She pressed it between her palms until the plastic dug into her skin. Something small and sharp bloomed in the center of her chest, a pain she had no word for yet. She did not cry. She did not understand enough to cry. She only lay there in the dark with the weight of a stranger's coat still remembered across her shoulders, and she stared at the cracks in the ceiling until the cracks began to blur. On the 7th morning, Damiano arrived with a manila folder instead of pastries. "Mrs. Vale," he said to Eleanor, who was sitting up in bed with a shawl around her shoulders. "I have arranged a different apartment for the 3 of you. It is on Mulberry Street, 3rd floor. The building is mine. There is an elevator. There is a doorman. The rent will not be your concern." Eleanor's hand went to her throat. The performance was immaculate. "Sir, we cannot. It is already done." Leah was standing in the kitchen doorway with Rosie against her hip. She had heard everything. Her eyes met Damiano's across the room. He expected gratitude. He expected perhaps a small, shy smile. What he saw, for the first time, was something else entirely. Something he could not name, because Leah herself could not have named it. And a thing without a name is very hard to read from across a room. She was afraid. She was afraid of herself. The move took less than an afternoon, because there was almost nothing to move. Luca and 2 younger men from the family carried Eleanor down the 5 flights of stairs in a medical transfer chair that had been delivered that morning. They packed Rosie's crib into a van. They wrapped the photograph of the young woman in the summer dress in brown paper and laid it on top of a cardboard box, and Damiano watched it go without saying a word. By sunset, apartment 3B on Mulberry Street had become their new address. The building had a doorman named Angelo, who wore a cap and opened doors with both hands and who did not ask questions about the people who lived on the 3rd floor. There was a brass-grilled elevator that actually worked. The hallways smelled of furniture polish. A silent man in a dark suit sat on a stool at the end of the corridor and read the same page of the same newspaper for 4 hours at a time. Leah walked through the front door of the apartment and forgot how to breathe for a moment. The living room was the size of the entire old apartment. Heavy curtains hung in deep cream. A velvet sofa sat at angles to two armchairs. A vase of fresh white lilies stood on the coffee table. The windows faced an interior courtyard, where a small fig tree grew in a stone planter. Sophia was waiting for her in the hallway. "Come, Bambina," she said, and took Leah by the hand. "Come see your room." The room was pink. Not the hard, electric pink of plastic toys, but a soft, powdery pink that made the walls look like the inside of a seashell. A white four-poster bed stood against one wall, made up with linens so smooth they looked painted on. A small desk sat by the window, with sharpened pencils lined up in a cup and a stack of new blank notebooks. A bookshelf held fairy tales and chapter books, and a stuffed gray rabbit with velvet ears. Leah did not move. She stood in the doorway and did not move, because she was afraid that if she stepped inside, it would turn out not to be real. "It's all yours," Sophia said gently behind her. "The bed, the books, the rabbit, everything." Leah finally crossed the threshold. She reached out one finger and touched the coverlet at the end of the bed. It was cool. "Is this for me?" she asked, very quietly. "Or is it for whoever lives here after me?" Sophia was silent for a heartbeat. Then she knelt and turned the child to face her. "It is for you, Leah. Only you. Nobody is coming after you." Rosie had a nursery next door in the palest yellow, with a carved wooden crib and a mobile of tiny birds turning slowly in the warm air. Eleanor had been installed in the master bedroom on a mechanical bed that raised and lowered at the touch of a button. A private nurse named Consuela had been hired to sit with her around the clock. Eleanor accepted this arrangement with the trembling gratitude of a woman who had been saved from the grave, and she played the part with an actress's pride. When the nurse stepped out of the room to fetch water, Eleanor's eyes, alone on the pillow, looked up at the ceiling and calculated. In the days that followed, Sophia came every morning. She took Leah to a department store on Madison and bought her 3 new dresses, 2 pairs of shoes, tights, a winter coat with a hood, and a pink backpack with embroidered stars. She took her to the zoo in the Bronx, where Leah stood in front of a sleeping tiger for 20 minutes without speaking. She took her to the kitchen at Moretti's one afternoon when it was closed, and stood her on a wooden stool and taught her how to roll a simple dough between her palms. On a quiet Tuesday, peeling tomatoes side by side, Sophia said without looking up, "My brother is not what people say he is." Leah kept her eyes on the tomato in her hand. "They say many things about him," Sophia went on. "Most of them are even true. He is hard. He is careful. He does not forgive the wrong kinds of mistakes. But he has a heart, Kara. He is only afraid of letting anyone see it." Leah did not answer. She did not know how to answer. Across town, in a private back room at Moretti's, Vincent Colombo set a glass down too hard on the table between them. "You've changed, Dante." "Have I?" "People are talking. The falcons are circling. Every conversation I have in the last 10 days starts with, 'Have you heard?' and ends with, 'Is it true about the child?' Let them talk. It's not just talk anymore. They're waiting. They are waiting for you to blink." Damiano lifted his espresso. "Then they will wait a long time." Through the window above the courtyard, Leah was visible 3 stories up, sitting on a small stone bench beside the fig tree, bouncing Rosie gently on her knee. Vincent looked at her a long time. "Are you sure, Dante?" "About what?" "About her. What do you actually know about that child?" Damiano did not answer. He had known everything that mattered since the morning she walked through his door, and he had decided, somewhere between the first spoon of vegetable puree and the sight of a girl testing the temperature against her own wrist, that knowing was not the same as walking away. That night, Leah lay on her new bed with Rosie asleep on the pillow beside her. The sheets smelled of lavender. The mattress was so soft her body seemed to float on it. Somewhere in the hallway outside, a clock chimed 10. She stared up at the ceiling. No one had ever tucked her in before tonight. Sophia had done it 2 nights in a row. Sophia had kissed her forehead and switched off the lamp and closed the door slowly, the way people close doors on things they loved. This is what real families do, Leah thought. Evelyn never told me about this part. The ache in her chest had a sharper edge tonight than it had last week. What am I supposed to do? Beneath the mattress, the flip phone buzzed once. She let it buzz twice more before she reached for it. Yes. Leah. Yes. Miss Evelyn. Phase 2 begins now. We need the weekly meeting schedule, where he eats on Mondays, who he sees on Wednesdays, what time he leaves the restaurant on Friday nights, details, patterns. Leah held the phone to her ear and said nothing. Leah, yes, repeat it back to me. Monday, Wednesday, Friday night, patterns, good girl. Then, in a voice a little quieter, a little colder, Evelyn said the sentence she said at the end of every call now, because she had begun to sense something softening on the other end of the line. Remember, he is not your father. He is the target. The line clicked. Leah lowered the phone. Beside her on the pillow, Rosie stirred and made a small sleeping sound, and Leah reached out and placed a hand lightly on her sister's back so she would know, even in dreams, that someone was still there. The wine cellar beneath Moretti's had been built in 1923 by Damiano's grandfather, and for most of its life it had served one purpose during daylight hours and a different purpose after the last customer had gone home. 8 men sat around its long chestnut table on a Wednesday evening in early November. The bottles lined the stone walls on either side of them. A single green-shaded lamp hung low over the table. Cigar smoke drifted upward through its halo and did not reach the ceiling. Damiano sat at the head of the table. Marco sat at his right. Vincent sat 3 chairs down on the left and had not touched the glass of Barolo in front of him. The meeting had covered the Bronx freight contract. It had covered the cousin in Philadelphia. It had covered the labor dispute at the construction site on 34th. 5 minutes from the end, when Damiano had asked in the usual way whether anyone had anything further, Vincent set his forearms on the edge of the table and stood up. Boss. Damiano did not look up from the papers in front of him. Sit down, Vincent. With respect. With respect. Sit down. I am going to say it. Vincent's voice was even, which was how Vincent's voice got when he was very angry and trying very hard not to be. I am going to say it because no one else at this table will. You are putting this family in danger. Marco's head turned slowly toward him. A child, Vincent said, walks in out of the rain. Nobody knows where she comes from. Nobody has ever heard the name Vale before. And since that afternoon you have spent half your waking hours inside that apartment on Mulberry. You leave meetings early. You take calls at her bedtime. You buy a fig tree for the courtyard because she stood next to one at the zoo. Vincent, Marco said. His voice had gone quiet in a way. Marco's voice rarely went. What exactly are you suggesting? Vincent did not look at him. He looked at Damiano. I am suggesting one of 2 things. Either that child is a trap somebody is very patiently setting for the man in this chair, or the man in this chair has lost his judgment to a pair of brown eyes and a bedtime story. The silence that followed sat on the table like a dropped stone. Damiano set down his pen. He rose slowly. He did not slam his fist, though his hand on the table had closed. He leaned forward on his knuckles, and when he spoke, his voice was the voice that had ended 3 different wars in the last 13 years without ever being raised above the level of a dinner conversation. You will shut your mouth, Vincent. Vincent did not sit down, but he did not speak either. I have not lost my judgment a single hour of a single day. I have been watching that apartment from the moment I walked out of it. I have been running that child's name through every drawer in this city. I know more about that situation than you know about your own wife's telephone. Do you understand me? Yes, boss. Sit. Vincent sat. The meeting ended 3 minutes later without another word spoken. In the alley behind the kitchen, under the one working bulb above the service door, Marco caught up with Damiano as he was opening the rear door of the Bentley. Boss. Later, Marco. Boss. Listen. Damiano paused with his hand on the roof of the car. Marco stepped closer so that his voice would not travel past the 2 of them. I dug further. That photograph on the wall of the old apartment. The young woman in the summer dress. I had it run through every facial recognition tool we own access to. And she doesn't exist. That face was assembled. Hair from one woman, jawline from another, eyes generated by software. It was a forgery, and a very good one. Leah Vale has no mother. She never had a mother. Not that one. Not any one that photograph could prove. Damiano was quiet for a long moment. A taxi passed the mouth of the alley and threw a slice of yellow light across his face and took it away again. I know, he said. Marco's head jerked back a fraction of an inch. You I knew before we left that apartment the first day. Boss. Then why? Because, Marco. Damiano opened the car door. Because I want to know who is playing me. And because the girl is not the enemy. Boss, she is a pawn. Whoever pushed her across that board is the enemy. I am going to let her finish the game she was sent to play. And then I am going to follow the hand that moved her. He got in the car. The door closed with the soft, expensive sound of a thing built to seal out weather and bullets alike. Marco stood in the alley alone and watched the taillights turn the corner, and he did not move for a full minute afterward. 3 blocks away, on the 3rd floor of a building Damiano owned, a 7-year-old girl was kneeling on a velvet ottoman at the coffee table across from the man who terrified 8 grown men every Wednesday. Between them sat a chessboard of inlaid ebony and ivory. Damiano had pulled the sofa close to the table so he could reach the pieces without stretching. He moved a pawn forward 2 squares with the tip of his index finger. "This one," he said, "is the smallest, the weakest. He walks 1 step at a time. He takes nothing but what is directly in front of him." Leah watched his hand. "He dies first, in most games. More pawns die than all the other pieces put together." Her small fingers tightened in her lap. "But," Damiano said, "if a pawn is patient, Leah, if a pawn crosses the whole board, all the way to the far end, all the way past every trap, the pawn becomes something else entirely. What does it become? It can become whatever the player chooses. A knight, a bishop, a rook. But most of the time, he lifted a tall, carved piece from the captured pile and set it gently on the pawn's former square. It becomes a queen, the most powerful piece on the board." Leah stared at the queen for a long moment. Then she lifted her eyes to his face. Her voice, when she spoke, was very small, and it was so hopeful it almost hurt to hear. "Can I be a queen, Uncle Damiano?" Damiano's mouth did something that was not quite a smile, and was not quite anything else. "You can be anything you choose to be, Leah." The fever came on just after midnight. Rosie had been fine at the 10 o'clock feeding. Leah had rocked her through the last of a bottle, burped her against a folded cloth, and laid her down in the yellow nursery with the mobile turning slowly in the warm air. The baby had closed her eyes without protest. She had done that every night for 2 weeks now, smoothly, easily, the way a baby was not really supposed to close her eyes. At 2 minutes before 2 in the morning, something woke Leah. She could not say what, a sound that was not a sound, a feeling, maybe. The kind a child gets in the marrow of her bones when something in the house has gone wrong without announcing itself. She slid out of bed in her nightgown and padded barefoot across the hall. Rosie was too still. That was the thing Leah noticed first, before she understood what she was noticing. The baby was too still, and too red, and the little gold curls at her temples were dark and wet and plastered to her skin. When Leah laid the back of her hand against Rosie's forehead, the heat came up through her fingers the way heat came up off a radiator. Rosie's breathing was wrong. Short, quick, shallow, like she had just been running. Leah did not think. She ran. She had never been down the hallway at this hour. She had never knocked on the door at the far end. She had, in fact. He'd been told that when the door at the far end was closed, it meant Damiano was working or sleeping and it was not to be opened. She pounded on it with both fists. "Uncle Damiano. Uncle Damiano. Please, please, please." The door opened before she had finished the second word. He was already pulling a shirt on over his undershirt. His hair was sleep-disordered in a way she had never seen. He did not ask what was wrong. One look at the child standing barefoot in the hallway, and he had already moved past her. He was in the nursery in 4 strides. He laid a hand on Rosie's chest, lifted her off the mattress with the precision of a man who had carried wounded men out of buildings, and was back in the hallway shrugging on his coat with the baby in the crook of his arm, before Leah had caught up. "Shoes," he said to her. "I get your coat and your shoes, Leah. We are going now." The drive to the hospital took 11 minutes at that hour, because Damiano did not stop for red lights after the second one, and because the man at the private wing on the Upper East Side had been called before the Bentley left the curb on Mulberry. 2 nurses and a pediatric attending were waiting for them at the side entrance with a gurney already rolled into position. Rosie was lifted out of Damiano's arm and wheeled through a set of double doors. The doors closed. Leah stood in the corridor in her nightgown and her too big coat and her bare feet, and the corridor was very long and very white and very quiet, and her sister was on the other side of a door she was not allowed to open. She did not make a sound at first. She sat down in one of the vinyl chairs. She folded her hands in her lap the way Sophia had taught her. She looked at the floor tiles and counted them. Then, on the 73rd tile, something broke. The sob that came out of her was not a child's sob. It was older than that. It was the sound a person makes when a thing they have been carrying for a long time finally puts them down instead. Damiano sat down in the chair next to hers. He did not say anything for several seconds. Then he did something he had not done in 13 years. He pulled a child into his chest and held her there. "She is going to be all right, Leah. You don't listen to me. She is going to be all right. I promise you. You can't promise. I can. And I do." The attending physician came out of the treatment room 45 minutes later. He was a tall man in his 50s with wire-framed glasses. He spoke quietly and efficiently, and he addressed his words only to Damiano, because a child in a nightgown was not the person who needed to understand what was coming next. "She is stable." The fever is coming down. Her oxygen is good. Thank God. Mr. Moretti. A word. They stepped 3 paces away. The doctor's voice dropped. But a corridor is a corridor, and Leah's hearing that night was the hearing of a small animal that had learned to listen for footsteps in the dark. We ran a full panel. The fever is a reaction. There is a sedative in her bloodstream that should not be in the bloodstream of a 5-month-old infant under any circumstance. Damiano went very still. What kind of sedative? A benzodiazepine derivative. Not pharmaceutical grade. Compounded somewhere. The trace suggests repeated low-dose administration over several weeks. Several weeks. Possibly longer. Her liver is under strain. If she had been given another dose tonight, she might not be here. Damiano did not move. When he spoke, his voice had gone down into the register he reserved for men who had crossed a line from which they would not be coming back. Who has been giving this baby medication? The corridor tilted slightly on its axis. Leah's mouth opened before she could stop it. Grandma gives her drops. She said they were vitamins. Damiano turned his head toward her with the slow, deliberate motion of a man forcing himself to move at the speed a child could tolerate. Drops, he said. Every night. In her bottle. She said it was, she said. Her voice failed. Inside Leah's chest, something was falling apart piece by piece. The little amber bottle. The nights Rosie had slept without a single murmur. The unnatural calm of a baby who used to kick and squirm. Evelyn's cold, measured voice on the phone. She is a tool. Do not forget which one of you are. They are poisoning my sister. Evelyn never said they would hurt Rosie. They never cared about Rosie. They never cared about me. Her knees locked. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them against the sides of her thighs to stop the shaking, and the shaking climbed up into her shoulders instead. Damiano watched all of this happen. He watched the color leave her face. He watched her eyes do the thing eyes do when a child is learning, in real time, that the world is worse than she was told it was. He watched the moment she realized that she was not the one running the game, and he made a decision. He did not ask her what she knew. He did not demand an explanation. He knelt in front of her, and he took both of her small, cold hands in his large, warm ones, and he said only, "You are safe, Leah. Your sister is safe. That is all you need to think about tonight." Rosie was released at 5 a.m. Damiano carried her through the side entrance and out to the car, with the practiced, careful arm of a man who had, at some point in the last few weeks, learned how. Leah sat beside him in the back seat and did not let go of his free hand the entire way home. The city slid past the window in slow blurs of gold and red and white. A delivery truck, a steaming manhole, a bakery whose lights had just come on, the first gray edge of sunrise coming up over the roofs of Queens. Leah pressed her forehead to the cool glass and watched the lights smear. "Uncle Damiano," she whispered, so quietly that only the two of them and the baby between them would ever hear it. "Yes, I don't want to hurt anybody." He did not ask her what she meant. He only tightened his hand around hers, and he did not let go until the car rolled to a stop beneath the awning on Mulberry Street. The basement beneath the law office on Atlantic Avenue had been dug out in 1941 to hide rum, and it had hidden other things since. No one on the street above knew it existed. The deed listed a boiler room. The boiler room was real. The stairs behind the boiler, hidden by a false wall of tool racks, were not on any blueprint the city had ever stamped. 5 people had come down those stairs that night. The room was lit by a single, low-hanging brass lamp. Its light fell on a chess table of pale marble veined with black, set in the center of the floor like an altar. The pieces were carved from the same stone. Around the walls, the rest of the room remained in shadow deep enough that the other figures seated in it were visible only by the pale shape of their hands or the glow of a wristwatch. At the chess table sat one man. His hair was the silver of polished nickel. His suit was a charcoal so dark it drank the lamplight. His face was clean-shaven, angular, entirely unremarkable in the way that only very careful men knew how to engineer. He had been many things on many continents over the last 30 years, and nothing written down anywhere. To the handful of operators who knew of his existence, he was called the Architect, and his name, when he permitted a name, was Silas Kane. He was moving a white pawn across the board with 2 fingers. He did not look up when he spoke. Status. Evelyn Cross stepped into the edge of the lamplight. She was not wearing the warm brown coat of the social worker tonight. She was in black, collar to ankle, and her hair was pulled back so severely that it looked painted to her scalp. Moretti has taken the bait completely. The child is inside his walls. She sleeps on the 3rd floor of one of his own buildings. He has personally walked her through the courtyard. He has carried the baby in public. In public. Twice. Once to a toy store on Prince Street. Once into the hospital. 4 nights ago. Hospital. The baby had a reaction. The nurse missed a dose timing. It was corrected. Corrected. The medication is at a new interval. It will not repeat. Silas set the white pawn down on its new square. He lifted a white bishop from the edge of the board and began turning it slowly between his fingers. He trusts her. He more than trusts her. He allows her inside small meetings. His sister has taken the child shopping. The consigliere no longer questions her presence in the apartment. Even Columbo has stopped objecting in front of the table. Perfect. A second voice came from the shadow on the right side of the room. It was older, with the faint rasp of a man who had spent 50 years breathing incense and cigar smoke in roughly equal measure. And the baptism? Silas smiled without looking. Father Dominic. Welcome. The priest stepped forward into the light. He was not in vestments tonight. He was in a plain black coat over a plain black shirt, and the white square at his collar was the only detail that would have identified him to a passerby on the street. Sophia Moretti's daughter is being christened at St. Patrick's at 11 o'clock Sunday morning, Silas said. The full family will attend. Damiano will walk in with his guard at the main door. He will never bring a weapon into a church. He has not done so once in 13 years. It is one of the 3 rules he keeps publicly. And the child? The child will be the flower girl. She has already been measured for a dress. She will walk the center aisle ahead of the family. She will enter the sanctuary first. And what does she do? Nothing. She does not need to know anything. She only needs to walk in on time. Evelyn picked up the thread. The side door off the east transept is the one the family will use for the processional. It opens onto a service corridor that passes the vestry. Father Dominic will ensure the bolt on that door is drawn back at 10:40. 2 men will be waiting in the vestry. Moretti will pass within 6 feet of them on his way to the font. 6 feet. 6 feet, with his back turned, with the child directly in front of him. He will not fire into the child. He will not have time to do anything. Silas placed the bishop back on the board. And the cleanup. The Falcons, Evelyn said. We have 3 of their soldiers under surveillance whose movements this week can be plausibly edited. Their prints will be on the weapons. Their car will be photographed within 2 blocks of the cathedral at the correct time. By Monday afternoon, every newspaper in this city will be running the headline, Moretti slain in Mafia war. And by Friday, the last of the 5 families will be at each other's throats without a hand visible among them. Somewhere in the dark behind her, one of the unseen figures exhaled. Father Dominic lowered his eyes. And the child? He asked again, quieter this time. Afterwards, the silence in the room changed shape. Silas Kane finally lifted his eyes from the board. They were pale, almost colorless, the kind of eyes that did not catch light so much as absorb it and give nothing back. The child and the infant will be collected from the pew in the confusion. They will be placed in a car. The car will not arrive where it is meant to arrive. No one survives to tell this story, Father. Not one person at that apartment. Not the old woman. Not the handler. Not the flower girl. Not the baby in her arms. They are children. They are loose ends. Silas, you have been very useful to us, Father. Do not make me remind you why. The priest said nothing. Silas looked back down at the board and moved a white knight into position. Phase 3 begins at sundown Saturday. Everyone at their posts. Nobody communicates with the apartment after Friday except through the old woman and Evelyn. Yes, keep the child happy. Let her play her little games. Let her sleep in that pink room of hers. She only has 5 nights left in it. Across the river, in that pink room, Leah was not sleeping. She had dreamed of the hospital again. In the dream, Damiano had picked her up off the floor of the corridor the way he had picked up Rosie, and he had carried her down a long white hallway, and he had told her, over and over, "You are safe, you are safe, you are safe," and she had believed it the way she had never been allowed to believe anything in her life. She had opened her eyes in the dark and reached automatically for the pendant at her throat. Her fingers closed on cold silver. The raven pressed against her collarbone with the weight it had always had. But tonight, for the first time, the weight felt different. Tonight it felt like a small, dead thing had been resting against her skin for 3 months, and she had been too young to notice the smell. She sat up. She unclasped the chain. She looked at it in the pale light from the hallway. The little carved bird looked back at her with its 2 black beads for eyes. She crossed to the desk. She opened the top drawer. She laid the necklace inside, on the far side of a stack of blank notebooks. and she closed the drawer slowly so that it would not make a sound. She did not know that nestled inside the silver bird's hollow breast was a listening device the size of a grain of rice. She did not know that she had, just, for the first time in 3 months, placed it somewhere it would no longer hear what she needed it most, tonight, to hear. Sophia lived in a brownstone on Sullivan Street with ivy climbing the front, and a small wrought iron gate that creaked the same way every time it opened. Damiano pulled up on Thursday afternoon with Leah in the back seat and Rosie asleep beside her. Sophia was waiting at the door in an apron, a 3-week-old bundle against her shoulder. "Come in. Isabella has been fussy all morning." Damiano kissed his sister and walked into the kitchen. Sophia bent at the knees so Leah could see the baby's face. "Leah, this is your cousin Isabella." Leah had never been called anyone's cousin before. She looked at the tiny closed fist and thought, without meaning to, that Rosie had once been this small, and that someone had begun putting drops under Rosie's tongue at about this age. Her throat tightened. Upstairs, in a bedroom the color of peaches, a small white dress hung from the closet door. The skirt was layered tulle. A sash of pale pink silk crossed the waist. A circlet of silk rosebuds rested on the dresser. "Sunday at St. Patrick's," Sophia said. "Isabella will be baptized. I would like you to be her flower girl. You will walk in first. Will you do that for me?" Leah crossed the rug. She touched the hem of the dress with 2 fingers. "Yes," she whispered. "Good girl. Try it on later for the seamstress." "Yes, Aunt Sophia." The word had come out before she could decide to let it. Sophia's face did something small and tender in the mirror, and she went back downstairs without remarking on it, because some things were more fragile than glass. Leah stood alone in front of the dress. She should have felt only happiness. Instead, a cold thread turned in her stomach, tightening for a reason she could not yet name. It was just past midnight when she woke in the Mulberry apartment. Consuela, the nurse, had gone home for the weekend. Rosie was asleep in the nursery. Damiano had returned to the penthouse hours ago. Leah slipped out of bed and padded toward the bathroom. The door to Eleanor's room was open a hand's width. Light bled out in a thin yellow stripe across the hallway floor. A voice was coming through the gap. The voice did not belong to the frail, coughing woman of the last 2 weeks. It was sharper, lower, younger, and clipped with the efficiency of someone giving a report to a person they feared. "Yes, Mr. Kane. St. Patrick's. 11 o'clock Sunday morning." Leah stopped breathing. "He will enter through the east side door. The bolt will be drawn at 10:40. The child does not suspect a thing. She is excited about the dress." Leah felt her own hand rise to her mouth. "Yes, sir. Once Moretti is down, the girl and the baby will no longer be necessary. I understand. Clean." The word clean hit her behind the ribs with a physical force. She staggered back a step. Her hip brushed the console table. A heavy crystal vase rocked once, and a small chime of crystal on lacquer rang through the hall. The voice cut off mid-syllable. "Hold on," Eleanor said sharply. Leah ran. Her bare feet made no sound. She was inside her bedroom, with the door eased shut, and her body beneath the blanket before the footsteps reached the hallway. The floorboard outside her door creaked. Twice. The door opened. Leah lay face down in the pillow, forcing her breathing to go slow, while her heart beat so hard she was certain the blanket trembled with it. Eleanor stood in the doorway for what felt like a full minute. She did not come inside. After an eternity, the door eased shut again. The footsteps retreated. The yellow stripe under Eleanor's door disappeared. Leah did not move for 20 minutes. Then she slipped into the nursery, lifted Rosie, and carried her back to her own bed. The thoughts arrived like stones dropped into deep water. They are going to kill him. They are going to kill Rosie. They were always going to kill us. I brought the devil to the door of the only man who ever saved me. The tears came without sound. She had learned, in her short life, how to cry silently. At last she slid to the floor, opened the bottom drawer of her desk, and took out the sketchbook Sophia had bought her, and a pencil. She wrote in the shaky block letters of a 7-year-old, "Uncle Damiano, they want to kill you, don't trust anyone, please save us." She stared at the page in the dark. She did not know how to get it to him without Eleanor seeing. She did not know how much time she had. She only knew, with a certainty she had never felt before in her short and carefully managed life, that she was done being a pawn. Morning came too soon. Leah had not slept. She had folded the sketchbook page into a square no larger than a playing card, slid it beneath the elastic cuff of her sweater, and pressed her wrist to her chest every few minutes to make sure it was still there. At 9 o'clock, the doorman rang up. "Miss Evelyn Cross to see you." Eleanor buzzed her up without a word. Evelyn walked in smelling of perfume and winter air, hung her coat on the hook like a woman who lived there, and crossed to the breakfast table. She laid one palm on the crown of Leah's head. "Good morning, little one. Did you sleep well?" The tiny pause before Leah answered would have been invisible to anyone else. Evelyn was not anyone else. "Yes. Your grandmother says she heard something in the hallway last night, around midnight. I got up. For water. You did not come to the kitchen. I went back to sleep." "I see." Evelyn sat across from her and took Leah's small hand in her own. The grip was warm and perfectly gentle and unarguable. "Darling, your grandmother worries you have grown too close to Mr. Moretti. You have not forgotten why you are in this house, have you?" "No, because if you were to make a mistake now, there would be consequences. For you. For Rosie. You understand." The spoon in Leah's other hand had begun to tremble. She set it down. "Yes, Miss Evelyn. Get your coat. I am taking you out for the day." The shopping lasted 9 hours. 3 boutiques. A department store on Fifth Avenue where Evelyn tried on scarves she had no intention of buying. A tier room where Leah was made to sit for 90 minutes, while the older woman spoke about nothing at all. Every few minutes, Evelyn's eyes flicked to the child's wrists, her pockets, her napkin. Leah understood, somewhere around the second boutique, that she was not being treated, she was being kept. The paper square stayed hidden beneath her cuff all day. At 3 in the afternoon, Damiano Moretti stepped out of the Bentley in front of the Mulberry Street building carrying 2 tickets for a matinee of The Wizard of Oz. Angelo, the doorman, rang up. Eleanor's voice through the receiver was small and tired. "Oh, Mr. Moretti. Leah has a stomach. She has been sleeping since noon. I did not want to wake her." Damiano stood in the lobby looking up at the ceiling. He did not speak for several seconds. "Of course. Tell her I came by." He stepped back out onto the sidewalk with the 2 tickets in his gloved hand. He looked up at the third-floor windows for a long time, and something inside him which had been quiet for days began to tick. In the car, he pulled out his phone. Marco, double the watch on Mulberry. Back service entrance. Elevator cameras every 4 hours. And every telephone number called from inside that apartment since the hospital. "Boss, I was going to call you. Offshore accounts. Eleanor Vale has been receiving wire transfers into a private account in the Caymans for 19 months. Source is a shell. No directors. The name on the file is Obsidian Holdings. Obsidian. Nobody has heard of them. Not the Sicilians. Not the Russians. Not the Irish. This is not the Falcones, boss. This is something I didn't know was in the game. Stay on it. You, me, Luca. Not Vincent. Understood." Leah was returned at 9 in the evening, exhausted in the specific way only children who have been watched all day can be exhausted. Eleanor took her coat. Eleanor fed her warm milk. Eleanor pressed a palm to her forehead with a tenderness that was, for the first time, actively frightening. "Good night, my little one." "Good night, Grandma." Leah waited until the apartment went still. Then she slipped out of bed, took her sketchbook from the desk drawer, and opened to a new page. She chose her colored pencils carefully. Green for grass, brown for a tree trunk, red for a roof, yellow for a sun, pink flowers along the bottom. In the center, she sketched a stick-figure family. A tall man, a small girl, a baby, a woman beside them in a cream blouse. Then, very lightly, in the gray pencil reserved for shading, she began to letter the bark of the tallest tree. Up the trunk, a reader who looked closely enough would find 3 small printed words tucked among the knots of the wood grain. St. Patrick, across a branch above them. Sunday, and at the base of the trunk, almost touching the grass, trap. She signed the picture LIA in the corner. She slid the drawing between the pages of her book, closed the cover, and sat in the dark with her hands folded in her lap, waiting for a chance she did not yet know how she was going to make. Luca called just after dawn. "Boss." Across the street from Mulberry. 4th floor, south-facing window. A man has been standing there with binoculars since 4 in the morning. 3 nights now. The unit was rented 3 months ago to a tenant who does not exist. Take him. Clean, quiet. The garage on West Street. Yes, boss. The garage had no windows. A single bulb hung over a wooden chair bolted to the concrete. The prisoner was in his early 50s. Gray turtleneck, runner's build, and the unblinking eyes of a man who had been trained to expect this room years ago. His wrists were zip-tied behind him. He had not spoken a word. Damiano circled him slowly. Marco stood 1 step behind. Name. Silence. Employer. Silence. Damiano stopped, lifted the man's chin with 2 fingers, and tilted his throat into the light. A small tattoo sat beneath the edge of his jaw. no larger than a thumbnail. A single faceted black stone in fine ink, catching the bare bulb the way the real thing would have. Marco. The file. Marco produced a manila folder from inside his coat and flipped through it standing. Obsidian circle. Whispered about since the mid-90s. Never confirmed. A coordinating body for transnational gray market commerce. Alleged to specialize in dismantling crime families that refuse to integrate with their supply chain. Boss, our own lawyers filed this under folklore. Apparently not. Damiano crouched, so his face was level with the bound man's. You are one of theirs. You watched a little girl sleep last night through binoculars. The man's mouth curled. Not a word. A smile. You have already lost. Have I? Sunday. The church. He dies. The child dies. Damiano did not move a muscle in his face. Luca stepped forward and struck once, professionally, at the base of the skull. The prisoner slumped against his restraints. Damiano straightened and walked 3 steps away. Isabella's baptism. A church full of my own family. A 7-year-old walked in front of me through the door. Boss, Marco said. Cancel it, and the child pays. They will know she was the leak. They will find her by Monday morning. They will put her in a car that does not arrive. Yes, go through with it. And I walk my sister and my niece and a flower girl into a room where armed men are waiting on the other side of the east transept. Yes. Damiano turned. Then I walk in as if I know nothing. We put our own men in the vestry and the service corridor the night before. We bring our own priest to the sacristy before dawn. Sophia, Isabella, and Leah come out through the Lady Chapel before the bells strike 11. And Leah now. She leaves Mulberry before sundown Saturday. I do not tell her why. I find a reason she will believe. She goes to a safe house outside the city. She has done enough. Marco nodded slowly. Boss. Even with surprise, even with every man, they have been building that room for months. People die in rooms like that. Damiano buttoned his coat. Then people had better be theirs. At 11 that morning, a cream town car pulled up outside Mulberry. Sophia stepped out in a belted camel coat to collect Leah for the final fitting. The seamstress needs 90 minutes. We will have her back before supper. Eleanor hesitated for half a heartbeat, then smiled and kissed Leah's forehead. Be a good girl for your aunt. The paper square stayed pressed against Leah's wrist inside her sweater sleeve. The drawing lay folded in her coat pocket. The penthouse was on the 72nd floor. The seamstress had not yet arrived. Sophia left Leah in the vast sitting room with a glass of warm milk and went into the kitchen to make a phone call. Leah walked to the center of the room. Through an open doorway across the hall, she could see a study. A desk of dark walnut, a leather blotter, a fountain pen uncapped beside a stack of correspondence. She listened. Sophia's voice carried from the kitchen, low and patient, discussing fabric with someone. Leah crossed the hallway. She pulled the folded drawing from her coat pocket. Her hands were shaking. She slid the paper halfway beneath the blotter, leaving only the top edge visible to whoever sat down at that desk, and turned to go back to the sitting room. She was 3 steps from the study door, when Vincent Colombo stepped into the doorway. Vincent's eyes went to her hands first. They always did. A child standing 3 steps from a man's private desk with something held behind her back was not a thing Vincent Colombo had the ability to ignore. What are you doing in here, little one? Leah's spine went very straight. She slid one hand behind her and pressed it flat to the small of her back. I was waiting for Uncle Damiano. In his study. I got lost. Vincent stepped in and closed the door with the side of his shoe. The fingers of his right hand drifted to the inside of his jacket. He did not draw the weapon. I have not trusted you for 1 hour of one day, so I am going to ask once, like an adult, because you have been behaving like one. What are you doing here? Something inside Leah gave way. It was not a break. It was a decision. Her chin trembled. The tears did not wait for permission. Sir, Uncle Vincent, I need your help. I don't want anyone to get hurt. She brought her hand out from behind her back and held out the drawing. Somebody is going to kill Uncle Damiano. At St. Patrick's. On Sunday, please. Vincent's hand came out of his jacket empty. He took the paper and held it up to the window light. His eyes moved across the crayon house, the crooked sun, the stick figures. Then they narrowed, and he turned the paper a 1/4 inch, and he saw the gray pencil writing up the trunk of the tallest tree. St. Patrick, Sunday, trap. The color drained from his face. How do you know this? I heard Grandma. She isn't my grandma. She works for a man named Kane. There is a woman named Miss Evelyn who gave me the necklace. She has been giving Rosie drops at night. The doctor said it was poison. The words tumbled faster now. They are doing it Sunday because Uncle Damiano won't bring a gun into a church. They're coming in the side door. After it's done, they said they don't need me or Rosie anymore. They said clean. Vincent lowered himself to one knee so his face was level with hers. Leah, why did you tell me this? Why didn't you finish what they sent you to do? She looked at him for a long moment. Because Uncle Damiano was the first person who asked me my name before he told me what to do. Vincent closed his eyes. When he opened them, he was already reaching for his phone. He dialed. It rang. It went to voicemail. He swore and hung up. He is in a meeting or in the shower or driving through a dead zone in Queens. It does not matter which. He stood, slid the drawing into his breast pocket, and buttoned the coat over it. You are coming with me right now. But nobody in this building is going to see us leave together. The flip phone in her coat buzzed. Eleanor's number on the screen. Vincent nodded. Answer. Breathe. You are at the seamstress. Nothing is wrong. Leah opened the phone. Grandma, where are you, child? Still here with Aunt Sophia. They're fitting the hem. You have been gone a long time. The dress needs to be longer than they thought. A silence. Come straight home, Leah. Yes, Grandma. The line cut. Vincent was already on his own phone with Marco. We have a problem. The child knows. The old woman is not an old woman. Mulberry is compromised. I am keeping her with me. Meet at the Sullivan house in 30. He pocketed the phone and placed one hand, very gently, on the side of Leah's head. It was a gesture he had not made to another human being in a decade. You are braver than any of us. The study door opened behind them. Sophia stood in the doorway with the seamstress's tape measure still in her hand. She saw Vincent kneeling with her brother's protected guest crying against his shoulder, and she opened her mouth. Vincent lifted one finger to his lips. Sophia, do you trust me? Vincent, do you trust me? Yes. Then take Leah, take Rosie, take your daughter. Pack a bag in 15 minutes. You are leaving the city tonight. I will handle the rest. Vincent, what Sunday's baptism is a trap? Sophia's hand fell slowly to her side. The tape measure slid out of her fingers and curled onto the rug. Saturday evening fell over Manhattan in a slow gray sheet of rain. Damiano stepped out of the elevator on the 72nd floor, peeled off his wet coat, and was reaching for the whiskey when the penthouse door opened without a knock. Vincent walked in. Where is she? Safe. Where? Scarsdale. The house off Old Army Road. Sophia is with her. Rosie is with her. 4 of our men on the property, 2 on the access road. Damiano's shoulders came down a quarter inch. Vincent watched him. You did not ask how the plan stood, Dante. You asked where she was. Yes. Vincent poured 2 fingers of something dark and did not drink. You knew from the beginning. You knew that child was a trap. I knew. How long? The first day. The photograph on her grandmother's wall was a composite. The lighting was wrong. Then why, Dante? You walked her into our houses. Damiano sat on the arm of a chair. I was 10 years old when my father was murdered at a dinner table. I was a pawn. Somebody moved me across a board I did not know existed. The rule I made when I took this chair was that if I ever found another child in that same position, I would give them the one thing I never had, which was a real choice. Vincent finally drank. You are either the most reckless man I have ever worked for, or the most deliberate. I cannot tell which. The house in Scarsdale was white clapboard, set back behind a low stone wall. Leah was on the porch before Damiano reached the steps. He knelt. She crashed into his chest. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, no, Leah. You listen. You do not apologize. You saved my life today. You are the hero of this story. I brought them to you. They were already coming. You are the reason they will not succeed. Her small fist uncurled between them. Something glinted in her palm. The silver raven. There is a little thing inside it. A microphone. I don't know if it still works. I thought maybe you could. Damiano took the necklace and lifted it to the porch light. A slow smile crossed his face. Leah Vale, you are a dangerously intelligent child. Marco had the device cracked open on a workbench in the garage within 40 minutes. The transmitter was paired to a relay, broadcasting on a civilian frequency. By 10 o'clock, that relay was traced to a law office on Atlantic Avenue. Boss. The architect is in that building tonight. Then we know exactly where he will not be tomorrow. The cathedral. He will send Evelyn. She will watch from the front pew. Good. That is where I want her. They spread a blueprint of St. Patrick's across the hood of a car. Our priest goes in through the clergy entrance at 4 in the morning. He performs the baptism. The side door off the east transept stays bolted from our side. 4 men in the vestry by dawn, 4 more in the service corridor. The circle believes the bolt opens at 10:40. At 10:39 I give the order. They walk into 6 guns, not an unarmed godfather. Vincent nodded. And the Falcones. Call them. Dante, call Paolo Falcone personally. Tell him the Obsidian Circle intends to frame his family for my funeral, and then come for his table before spring. He will listen. He has always been smarter than his cousins. He will want a seat at a meeting after this. He will have one. At 11:07, a telephone rang in the Mulberry apartment. Eleanor picked it up on the first ring. Yes. Across the line, from a black car idling on Canal Street, Evelyn's voice was very quiet. Status. The child has not come back. Sophia has not called. There is no car at the curb. Something is wrong. A single beat of silence. Activate the contingency. Take a team to the apartment. Bring the girl back. If she is not in this building by midnight, you bring her from wherever she is. Understood. And Eleanor. Yes. Do not come back without her. 3 in the morning on Mulberry Street. The rain had stopped. A thin fog hung in the alleys. Angelo the doorman was sitting 2 floors below ground eating a sandwich he had not bought himself. The service entrance on the far side of the block stood open a careful hand's width. A black panel van rolled past the corner of Grand and Mulberry. 4 figures stepped out and crossed the service alley in single file. They moved the way soldiers move when soldiers have been trained somewhere that does not issue patches. They climbed to the 3rd floor. The lockpick took 11 seconds. The door swung inward. Apartment 3B was dark. Apartment 3B was empty. The first man through took a single step onto the parquet and understood, a fraction of a second before the lights came up, that he had walked into a room designed to receive him. Luca Bianchi flicked the switch. 6 of Damiano's men rose from behind the sofa, from the kitchen archway, from the hall. Drop them. One did not. One never does. The exchange lasted under 4 seconds. 3 intruders hit the floor on their knees. The 4th hit it flat and did not get up. Luca knelt in front of the tallest. The man wore plain black. A short white collar lay folded in his breast pocket. His face was pale and grooved with the creases of a man who had spent 50 years at altars. Well, Father Dominic, what a surprise. Damiano arrived at 3:20. He did not take off his coat. Silas Kane. Where? Father Dominic tilted his chin up. A smile moved at the corner of his mouth. You cannot reach him. He flew out of LaGuardia at 9. He is over water by now. Where to? Somewhere warm. Somewhere you cannot extradite from. Damino's face did not move. Then you are no longer useful. 3 blocks north, Marco was already standing on a back stair landing the Obsidian Circle had not known he knew about. Eleanor came down the fire stairs with a leather bag in one hand and a small automatic in the other. The oxygen tubing was gone. The felt hat and dark coat belonged to a woman 30 years younger than she had played. Marco stepped out in front of her. Going somewhere, grandmother? Out of the way, mister. Ricci. The lungs seemed to have cleared up nicely. She raised the pistol. From the half-flight above her, Luca's voice said calmly, No. She turned her head half an inch too late. His shot took her through the meat of her right forearm. The pistol clattered down the stairs. She slid to her knees against the wall with her good hand pressed to the wound. She talked in the garage on West Street by 4:30. She talked because nothing in her training had required her to be a martyr. Silas Kane had not fled the country. Silas Kane was still in New York. Silas Kane was waiting on a motor yacht docked at a private slip at Brooklyn Navy Yard, where, at 10 in the morning Sunday, he intended to receive confirmation that Damiano Moretti had died on the steps of St. Patrick's, and then leave the continent by water before the news broke. Father Dominic's line about the charter plane had been a feed, a last favor from a priest to an architect. Damiano set down the glass of water he was holding. Change of plan. We are not going to St. Patrick's. Marco lifted his head. We are going to the water. 60 miles north, in a white clapboard house in Scarsdale. A 7-year-old girl sat on the window seat of a guest bedroom with her knees pulled up to her chin. The moon through the curtains was enormous. Rosie slept behind her in a travel crib. Isabella slept in the next room. Sophia sat in the armchair by the door, with a book she was not reading. Aunt Sophia. Yes, Cara. Is Uncle Damiano going to be all right? Sophia put the book down, crossed the room, and gathered the child against her side on the window seat. He is fighting for you tonight. Leah. Do not worry. Leah rested her forehead against the cold glass. She had never been taught to pray. She did not know the words, so she made up her own, the way she had once made up lullabies for Rosie, because no one had sung any to her. "Please," she whispered in her head, to whoever heard such things at 3 a.m. in the countryside, "please keep him safe. I have never had a father, and he is the closest thing I have ever come to one." 10 a.m. at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. The sky had cleared into a hard, pale blue. A cold wind came off the East River. The private slip sat behind a chain-link gate at the end of a service road that appeared on no tourist map. A 60-foot motor yacht rocked at its moorings, the name painted over in fresh white. 2 men in charcoal windbreakers stood at the stern, 2 more at the bow. 4 figures were visible through the tinted salon windows. 8 guards, no mistake. 100 yards back, behind a shipping container, Marco lowered his binoculars. "He is here, boss." Exactly where the old woman said. Evelyn in the forward salon, long coat, across the table from him. The Falcons. Along the warehouse on the north side. 10 men. Paolo's personal. The detectives. 2 unmarked cars at the service gate. Federal car arriving at 10:06. Then we give them a 10:05. Damiano stepped out of the car alone. He walked down the service road with his hands visible and empty. No coat bulge, no weapon, and none of the 8 guards fired, because the man in the salon had already given the order to let him come. The cabin door slid open. Silas Kane rose from the banquet. "Mr. Moretti, Mr. Kane, please, sit." Damiano did not sit. Evelyn Cross sat to Silas's left, a compact pistol resting on the table beneath her folded hands. She did not look at Damiano. "I have been watching you for 11 years, Silas said pleasantly. "Before that, your father, for what little of his life was left to watch. You have done something with this city my predecessors never credited you for. You used a 7-year-old as a weapon. Children are the most effective weapons in the world. Nobody suspects them. Nobody searches them. Nobody asks what is inside a silver pendant. That is exactly why you were going to lose." Silas's smile paused. "I beg your pardon. You saw a weapon. I saw a child. One of us was wrong about what she was." Damiano lifted his left wrist and tapped the watch twice with his thumb. Outside, a red dot settled on the back of the neck of the man at the bow. A second dot found the stern guard. A third flashed across the salon window and laid itself at the base of Silas Kane's throat. Silas saw it before he felt it. His hand started for his jacket. He was 2 inches too slow. The firefight lasted under 4 minutes. Paolo Falcone's men took the gangway before any deck guard reached the rail. Marco came up the starboard side. Luca breached the forward salon through the skylight. 3 obsidian guards went down in the first 20 seconds. The remaining 5 made a stand near the galley and fell one at a time. Evelyn Cross chose her moment. She waited until Damiano had turned his back to check the aft corridor, and she brought the pistol up from beneath the table with the calm, practiced motion of a woman who had done it before. She did not see the shadow behind her. Marco's round entered between her shoulder blades. She folded onto the table without a sound. The pistol fell out of her fingers onto the salon floor. Silas Kane was not in the salon when the shooting stopped. Damiano spotted him through the shattered window, limping across the aft deck with a dark stain spreading across his left thigh. Silas reached the rail, threw one leg over, and half jumped, half fell into the water between the yacht and the dock. Damiano was across the deck in 5 strides and over the rail after him. He took Silas by the shoulder and the back of the neck in a grip no wounded man was going to break. Silas's face tilted up. His teeth were red. "You have killed me, Moretti. The circle will not stop. There will be another. That child will never be safe." Damiano's hand tightened, then deliberately eased. "She has me. That is not enough. She has me. And she has an entire Moretti family. That is more than enough." He did not push Silas under. He dragged him to the ladder and let Paolo Falcone's men haul him onto the dock, where 2 men with federal identification on lanyards were already waiting. Cuffs clicked. A charge sheet long enough to take a full minute to read aloud. The sedan carrying Silas Kane pulled away still bleeding. Damiano stood alone at the end of the slip afterward. A gull cut across the open water. He tilted his head back. The sky above Brooklyn was the clean, washed blue of a morning after a very long storm, and for the first time in more than 20 years, he did not have to listen for what was coming behind him. He reached into his coat for his phone. "Marco. Boss. Bring them. Bring Leah. Bring Rosie. I want to see her. 2 in the afternoon at the white clapboard house." The sun lay in warm patches across the porch boards. A Bentley rolled up the gravel drive and stopped. Damiano stepped out. His suit had not been changed. There was dust along one sleeve and a dark smear across the front of his white shirt he had not bothered to hide beneath his coat. He walked like a man who had not slept since Friday. From the second-floor window, a small face appeared. It vanished. A heartbeat later, the front door slammed open, and a 7-year-old girl flew down the porch steps in her socks. Damiano dropped to one knee on the drive with 6 feet still between them. She hit him at a run. Her arms went around his neck. She buried her face in the space where his collar met his jaw, and the sobs were the deep, shaking kind a child has been holding in too long. "You're not dead. No, you're not dead. You're not dead. Because you saved me." He kissed the top of her head, twice, then a third time. He had never done that before in his life. She pulled back. "I'm sorry. I lied to you. From the beginning." He smoothed a strand of damp hair from her forehead. "No, Leah. You saved me from the beginning." "I don't understand. I knew. From the first morning, I knew you had been sent. I knew the pendant was a listening device. I knew the photograph on that wall was not of anybody real. I chose to help you anyway. I chose it because I could see what you were underneath, what you had been told to be. And I was right." The front door opened again. Sophia stepped out with Rosie on her hip. "Brother, we need to talk about the future of these 2 little girls." They gathered around the kitchen table, Leah on a chair next to Damiano, her hand never letting go of his, Rosie in a playpen by the window. Vincent leaned against the counter with a coffee cup, and for the first time the look he gave Leah was not the look of a soldier watching a threat. It was the look of an uncle. Marco came in through the back door with a folder. Eleanor talked again this morning. With the painkillers and the federal deal, she filled in most of the gaps. Leah's real mother was a woman named Anna Vale. She was a junior operative in an offshoot of the Circle until 8 years ago, when she defected and tried to extract her daughter. The Circle found her 3 months after Rosie was born. They killed her. Leah was 6. She was placed into the training program as a ward of the organization. Leah had gone very still. "My mother. Yes, I thought I just couldn't remember her. You were not supposed to remember her." Damiano tightened his grip on her hand. "There is also the child." Marco's eyes flicked to the playpen. Rosie is not Leah's biological sister. Her real mother was another defector, in a different cell in Montreal. She was killed shortly after Rosie was born. The infant was placed with Leah as a control lever, a second child to threaten if Leah failed to comply. Nobody spoke. Leah looked slowly toward the playpen. Rosie looked up and grinned. A toothless, delighted grin, because the baby did not understand any of it, and never would, and was simply glad to see the face she had come to know as mine. Leah's eyes filled. "She's still mine." Damiano's voice was almost rough. "Yes, she is still yours. Nothing anyone told us today changes that by 1 inch." He turned to his sister. "Sophia, you will be godmother to both of these girls." Sophia's first tear was already on her cheek before she spoke. "Yes, they come home with us. They stay with us. Forever. Papers, guardians, schools, a future. All of it. I will love them like my own, Dante. I swear it." The room went quiet. Leah turned on her chair and looked up at the man beside her, at the smear of blood on his shirt, at the tired lines at the corners of his eyes, at the hand that had not once let go of hers since she had run out of the house in her socks. "Uncle Damiano." "Yes. Could you?" she swallowed. "Could you be my papa?" He did not answer right away. He looked at her as though he were not sure he was permitted to accept something that large. Then he nodded, just once, very softly. "If you want that, Leah Moretti." The smile that rose onto the child's face then was the first real smile of her life. Spring came to the Moretti estate in the first week of April. The house sat at the end of a long private drive in Westchester, stone and white shutters and wisteria beginning to bloom along the south wall. Pink tulips lined the garden path. Lilacs were budding. A cherry tree by the stone bench had opened its first blossoms 2 days earlier. Under that cherry tree, a little girl in a pale yellow dress was spreading a blanket on the grass. Leah was 8 years old now. Her hair had grown past her shoulders, brushed and held back by a small silk ribbon. Her cheeks were fuller. Her eyes were steadier. She moved the way children moved when they had not, for many months, been required to watch every doorway. Across the lawn, wobbling on new feet, came Rosie. She had turned 1 3 weeks ago. She came toward her sister with both arms out, fell twice in the grass, and got up both times without crying, because a child raised in a house full of love did not have to decide whether it was safe to try again. "Come on, Rosie. Good girl." Leah caught her and rolled with her onto the blanket. The sound they made together was the sound of a house that had forgotten how to be afraid. Damiano watched from the window of his study. His hair had gone a little silver at the temples. The hardness around his mouth had softened in one particular corner, the corner that turned up whenever he heard that laugh on the lawn. The construction company was legitimate now. The restaurants were legitimate. Vincent ran the day-to-day with the full backing of the table. Sophia came every Sunday with Isabella, and the two little girls were already learning each other's names. Marco appeared in the doorway with a cardboard box. Boss, the old files. The last of them. Should I burn them? Damiano did not take his eyes off the garden. No, keep them. I want to remember who I used to be. And I want to remember who saved me. Leah found him on the garden bench 10 minutes later. She climbed up beside him without asking. A cardinal sang twice in the cherry tree above them. Papa. The word still made him close his eyes for a half second. Yes, Piccola. I want to learn chess. He turned to face her. Do you remember the first lesson? A pawn that walks all the way to the end of the board can become a queen. And what about my daughter? She smiled up at him. I am already a queen, Papa. His eyes went to her throat. The silver chain no longer carried a raven. The pendant at her collarbone was a small letter M entwined with a single rose, the crest of the Moretti family, worked in polished silver. She noticed him looking. Papa, can I keep this one forever? It is yours, Leah. Forever. Damiano Moretti had once been the most feared man in New York. His rivals feared his strength. His enemies feared his cruelty. But no one ever knew that his heart had a single narrow opening, and it was reserved for a little girl who walked into his restaurant one morning and asked for scraps. She came to deceive him. In the end, she saved him not only from a bullet, but from the loneliness he had carried every day of his adult life. Sometimes family is not the people who share our blood. Sometimes family is the people we choose, even when we meet them in the darkest circumstances of our lives. And sometimes the strongest force in the world of powerful men is not power at all. It is the real love of one small child who was brave enough to choose mercy over fear. That afternoon, a photographer came from the city. Damiano stood in the center. Leah stood beside him. Sophia held Rosie on one hip and Isabella on the other. Vincent stood at the edge of the frame, smiling like a man who had finally stopped counting doorways. The photograph was hung that summer on the main wall of the library, beside a faded color photo of a man at a dinner table holding two small children on his knees, taken one evening long before the gunshots, father and son, side by side on the wall, both surrounded, at last, by the families that had loved them. If this story touched your heart the way it has touched so many others, take a moment to hit that subscribe button, click like, and share this video with someone who still believes in second chances. New emotional stories are uploaded here every single day, and your support is what keeps them coming. We would love to hear from you. What part of Leah's journey moved you the most? The moment she asked for leftovers? The night she discovered the truth? Or the afternoon under the cherry tree when a pawn finally became a queen? Tell us in the comments below. Tell us what this story reminded you of in your own life. Every comment here is read, and every story shared in this community matters. To each of you watching today, wherever you are in the world, thank you for spending this time with us. We wish you good health, peaceful days, and a home full of the kind of love that does not ask where you came from, only where you want to go next. Goodbye for now. We will see you again in the next story.